Last week we talked about Two-Face and how his coin flips might not be exactly as fair as he thinks they are, and also how Batman Rebirth paints Batman as a villain of sorts. Let's see what you guys had to say. First up, let's address some of your guys' comments from the Two-Face video. At the very end of the video, I put up a poll and asked you guys to flip a coin and tell me if it lands on heads or tails, and 33% of you guys said it landed on the edge. You filthy, filthy liars. If I'm remembering correctly, and apologies, I don't have the research in front of me right now, but I think the odds of a coin landing on its edge were somewhere like 1 in 6,000, depending on the coin. I think that was like a nickel, so that was like the best case scenario. But the thing that I'm more interested in is that 22% of you guys said tails, and almost double that, 43% said heads, which is really interesting to me. If you haven't voted on that, I would love you to do so. Flip a coin, go over to that video, vote on heads or tails, tell me what it landed on. Don't say edge, you guys, unless it did land on the edge, in which case, hey, screenshot, it didn't happen. But moving off of that, I think the number one comment that I need to address came from people like Acrimonious Mirth and a whole bunch of other people who were talking about my analysis of Two-Face's coin-flipping rig machine thing that he had in the animated series. So the conclusion that I came to is that that machine is 100% rigged. It will flip the exact same way every single time. There's a cat going crazy back there. Now, the reason I came to that conclusion, I guess I didn't word properly because there was a lot of confusion around it, so I'm going to try to clear that up. So let's go ahead and assume that Harvey Dent did not test the rig before Batman got there. Would it still be random? Would it still be fair even though he has no idea which side the coin's going to land on? I say no. I compared it to the real-life coin flipping rig that researchers built in that paper that I cited throughout the whole episode, and I said that it needed careful adjustment in order to start heads up and also end up heads up. And a lot of you guys pointed out again that, well, you know, Two-Face's coin flipping machine probably didn't have a lot of careful adjustments. It looked like it was pretty much thrown together, so that's that. End of discussion. But here's the thing, Two-Face's rig does not need those careful adjustments. Again, those careful adjustments, sorry for using that term a million times right now, was only specifically to get a coin that starts heads up to also land heads up. That's what the adjustments were used for, but in Two-Face's case, it doesn't matter. He's not actually trying to have an end goal in mind where it starts one way and ends one way. In his mind, it's random, but since it is still powered by a machine that will likely flip it the same way every time regardless, it's still not random. At the end of the day, the point I'm trying to make here is that it doesn't matter if Two-Face never tested it. It doesn't really matter that he doesn't know which side it's going to land on, and I don't even think the machine needs careful adjustments. It's still going to flip it the same way every time. If we get a dozen Batmen strapped to a dozen coins and flip them in the air, it's likely that they're all going to land the same way. Even if 100% of them don't land the same way, maybe there's an outlier. Batman wiggles a little bit and it throws the coin off. It's not going to be 50-50. And if the giant coin toss isn't 50-50, then that is far from the fairness that Two-Face likes to promote. Professor Persona on the same comment thread brings up the idea that, well, you know, because Two-Face never tested it, it's still kind of fair because he doesn't know how it's going to land. But again, I say that it doesn't really matter if he doesn't know which way it's going to land. The way that I see it anyway is that the coin is probably still going to land the same way every time, which is far from a random 50-50 chance that Two-Face is going after. I guess it can kind of be seen as a perspective thing. If Two-Face only launches it once and he doesn't know which side it's going to land on before he launches it, then to him it's random, but I mean, in the grand scheme of things, it's not really random. Jon Causith says if he really wants something random, he should just use a random number generator. Now, I actually thought about this on the video. I wanted to know how to actually generate a random number. So I looked into some random number generators, and I found that most random number generators are actually not random at all. They're just pseudo-random. They're still based on a deterministic system that you could theoretically pick apart and find out exactly, you know, what number or what value it's going to land on. Even a website like random.org, which you can use to generate random numbers, uses atmospheric noise, I think, which, I mean, is trickier to pick apart, but is still theoretically possible. Which is why in that video I kind of concluded that, as far as we know right now, the only true randomness in the universe exists on the quantum level. I'm gonna go ahead and switch gears now to the Comic-Con video about Batman Rebirth. If you remember in this video, Haas talked about how the use of framing and lighting and colors makes certain characters appear as more heroic than others, even painting Batman kind of as a villain in this issue, whereas it frames the characters of Gotham and Gotham Girl as the heroes. What's really interesting about this, though, is hearing the comments from some of you guys who are saying you felt the exact opposite. Like Akiva Daphydd, or even Dranbo, who even goes on to point out something kind of interesting, which is perspective is all about perspective. So to break that down, we're talking literal perspective, the way that the camera is angled at these characters, and how you perceive them is actually all about the perspective that you come with. So Drambo goes on to talk about how they felt that Gotham and Gotham Girl were villains, even though, you know, if you put Superman in a similar pose, you go, hero. That he's definitely, absolutely a hero. But because you're viewing Gotham and Gotham Girl in a book titled Batman, it almost makes you feel like things are a bit off. You know, you don't have the perspective of these characters as heroes yet, especially in a book about, you know, it's supposed to be about Batman. So if Batman is the one lurking in the shadows, all hunched over and maybe painted as a traditional villain might be, but we know him to be the hero, then having these characters painted as the heroes in this book is almost like reversing the perspective on that, even by saying, no, they look like we put them in the poses of superheroes, but they're really villains. That's not a spoiler, by the way, that's just me reading more into it. So if Batman is the one that's lurking in the shadows and in the darkness, and it's a book about Batman and we know him to be the hero, then maybe when you have these characters who are presented in a classic superhero pose, but in a book about Batman where, you know, that perspective is switched, it makes you bring the perspective of, well, these guys must be villains then. And to go even further down this rabbit hole of perspective being all about perspective, Ben Mead talks about how he also thought that Gotham and Gotham Girl were villains because of the way their position has them looking down on Batman and looking down on Gordon, as if they think themselves superior to everyone else. And to that I say, again, we could put Superman in that same pose, and now what we have instead is not Superman looking down on everyone, but everyone looking up to Superman as the hero he is. See, it's still all about perspective. Ooh, boy, visual storytelling is super interesting. So you know what? I'm gonna give everyone involved in this conversation about perspective a NerdSync no prize. I'm gonna give it to Dranbo, I'm gonna give it to Ben Mead, and other people who I'm forgetting. You get this week's NerdSync no prize. Congratulations. A couple of you did, so you're gonna have to split it, I guess. I'm gonna have to... Kidding, I wouldn't do that. I think that's going to do it for comments this week, guys, but a couple quick housekeeping notes. We have a brand new episode of the NerdSync podcast out right now where we're talking about legacy heroes, you know, heroes who have passed down the title to different characters. Super interesting conversation. It went a little bit longer than I expected, and we went on a ton of tangents. I also throw in a bunch of Hamilton references. Legacy! What is a legacy? You can, of course, find that on iTunes and SoundCloud and Stitcher and wherever else RSS feeds go. We'll have a bunch of links down in the description below. That's going to do it for this week. Make sure you join us on Wednesday for another episode of Comic Misconceptions, continuing our month of Batman-themed videos, Battober, the long Halloween. We're talking about the Bat Signal this week, so get hyped for that. It's actually crazy interesting. In the meantime, though, if you missed out on last week's videos, you can click right here to watch the one about Two-Face and his coin flippies. You can also click right here to watch the Comic-Con about Batman Rebirth. Plenty of great stuff for your eyes to look at. And of course, make sure you hit that big sexy subscribe button. My name is Scott, reminding you to read between the panels and grow smarter through comics. See ya.